So we're just going to have a soft start so that we're not all just staring off into the sky here for a little while. So I'm Nicholas Porter. I'm delighted to be with you here. Why am I talking about the Middle East? Because it's on the top of many people's minds right now. But because I have lived and worked and studied and traveled throughout the region since 1988. So I too would be one of those males who would raise my hand and say, I think I know something about the Middle East, all right? And I've lived in Cairo, and I've lived in Jerusalem a number of times. I've been to all the countries that count in the Middle East. Let's put it that way. All right. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk. We're going to do three primary things. We'll talk a little bit about what Jerusalem Peace Builders does. We're going to talk. We're going to spend more time with one of the techniques we use to create change with the people we work with. And then, of course, there's going to be questions because the Middle East makes us ask questions, provokes us into questions, all right? No question is too basic, but let's remember, we have a time limit. And so I may reserve the right to say, talk to me after the service or something like that, okay? So don't get upset if I move a question to a side. Okay, thoughts? Good?
Did you explain JPB?
No, we're going to do that. That's part of what we're going to do. Thank you for asking. Ellen told me to speak up, and you're telling me to reminding me to give the presentation. I'll do just that. Good morning, come on in. So, no, you're in fact 4 minutes early. So, we have people coming? Quiet, perfect. So, long ago, I was someone whose parents and my education and my own inclinations sort of were grooming me for government service, just being groomed along a track. And when I went and lived in Egypt to continue studying Arabic and specialize in Islamic extremism, God said, surprise, you're not doing that. And found myself rather unexpectedly turned in another direction and found my way up to Jerusalem, where I went to a dinner. I'm a graduate student. I have long hair. I have a corduroy jacket. Remember those ones with the elbow? Just so cool from the 70s. It was my brother Michael's. Jimmy knew my brother when he was still alive. And a friend of my father said, come and have dinner with us tonight. So man, I show up. Hair may have been washed. I'm not sure. And I'm seated next to Desmond Tutu. And there's a lot of diplomats, and we get talking, and I know something about the Middle East, so I'm able to keep up with the conversation. And at the end of the conversation, the Archbishop in Jerusalem said, we have a job for you. And just pulled me right in and worked with him and with a place called St. George's College that's right next to the cathedral there. And that's where your illustrious rector has spent some time as well. So that was sort of my start, okay? You should know that I have German heritage. I have a grandmother who died quite young, whose name was Charlotte Weissman. And I have another grandmother who was named Marian Mansour, okay? So I'm all in on the conflict in Israel and Palestine, just all in, okay? And, you know, it squeezes me a lot in different directions. You should also know that I reluctantly got involved with the Middle East. Part of being groomed for government service was studying Russian from a tender age of about 12 years old. Okay, and I backed into studying the Middle East because it was a weak point in our struggle with Moscow, and it still is. Okay, what's our time and run? Can we start on
9:02.
9:02? Excellent. Okay, so let me first talk to you a little bit about Jerusalem Peace Builders. My wife and I and two dear college friends, we were all college sweethearts, and we actually all got married.
Just kidding.
And we started an organization together called Jerusalem Peace Builders. I was a parish priest. I used to take care of the Archbishop in Jerusalem. I used to be the subdean of the cathedral in Paris. I was the rector of all Switzerland. Pretty cool title, right? Just one church, so you get to be rector of the whole country. I was in Switzerland, then I came back to Connecticut, and all through that time, the Middle East kept on sort of calling me, this thing I had reluctantly backed into. And so in 2011, after my mother died, I said, you know what? Actually, I was driving by the most beautiful field in Vermont, and I looked at that field, and it looked at me, and God said, go for it. And so my wife and I started, and Stuart and Angie started an organization called Jerusalem Peace Builders. So, you know, what's the why? The why is simply, we believe that peace is possible, and we know that when people encounter each other, they change. They absolutely do. So how can you structure encounters that drive change? All right. So the Middle East is a tender topic. It is just even in this room, I imagine. So how do you start on a tender topic? You work with kids. No one can complain or argue about working with kids. So we started programs for young people. Because they're sort of exempted from other considerations, but this is a long-term project. If you want tree lumber, you got to plant trees. You want peace, you got to work with young people. And the first year, 2011, we had, 11 kids was all we could recruit. 11 kids. That was a little discouraging, I got to tell you, to start. Last year, 2022, last year we have our full stats. So we had over 50 programs and impacted 10,000 people. Okay? So course of maybe 12 years or 10 years, 11 years, moving from 11 to 10,000. What does that say? That says, A, we know what we're doing, and B, people respond. So that stereotype of everybody sort of an ostrich in the Middle East with their head stuck in the sand, it's not true, right? Jews, Christians, Muslims, Druze people in Israel and Palestine and Jerusalem, they want a different life. There's a huge challenge about how do you get there from here? And double it up, make it harder. How do we get there from here with others, not just myself, but moving along together, okay? So, worked with kids, developed program. We have summer programs. Americans love summer programs. Della's smiling herself. We all think of kids splashing in canoes and lakes and all that. People are smiling. Actually, you don't get to do that in peace building because there is a demonstrated dynamic that when you bring together, let's say, hostile parties in groups larger of 18 or 20, they won't connect with each other. they'll stay with their own kind. You have to make it large enough so it's got an interesting dynamic, but small enough that people who enter in back to back eventually flip face to face. Okay. So what Jerusalem Peace Builders does that's unique, because there's lots of other great organizations out there that do it, and thank God we're underserved in this, okay? But what makes us unique is we are a 4-year program. So after your freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior year, those ones that you've heard about usually do it after your sophomore or junior year. It's a bit of a one and done, all right? High rates of recidivism in that kind of situation, right? You know, you go to camp, you feel really jazzed up, you know, your grumpy grandparents and your brother beat you up a little bit, and all the great things you learned and said disappear, the needle goes down again. You do it 4 times, the needle doesn't go down as far, okay? That's the point of that. So we're 4-year, we're both in the summer and in schools, okay? So it's not enough to take Ellen for a great 2 weeks in the summer. I mean, it's better than nothing, absolutely. But what works is having contact with Ellen throughout the year, throughout the school year. And then the last thing that makes us unique is we're interfaith. And for us, interfaith is not a synonym for mixed. It's obviously mixed if it's interfaith, but theology and people's religious identities are key to what we do, right? I mean, we're not scared about talking about God with people, okay? And we've got great rabbis and a great priest and great imams who work with our young people. And when we talk about matters of the soul with these young people, it is the time when the young people are there at their most attention and have the most questions. Because in the Middle East, religion is often a reinforcer for identity and things that we expect to hear, let's say, at church or in a synagogue or in a mosque. That's not usually what's talked about. Okay. In fact, in lots of churches in the Middle East, there is no sermon. There is none. There's no message. Okay. So it just becomes part of your identity. And the whole thing, and we're getting right into our methodology in just a sec here, is we work with 2 idioms of the Middle East. Everything we do is based on family, because that's the dominant social idiom of the Middle East, is family. You can scale it up to tribe, or you can scale it down to a household, right? But your family. There's no Nicholas. There's, I am son of someone, or like someone is my son or daughter, or I'm brother of someone, right? There's no just Nicholas. You're always in relationship. So that's that idiom of family. And the other one is religious identity. Whether you're practicing or not, you identify as a Jew or as a Christian or as a Muslim or as a Druze. And most Druze people do not practice. Their religion's secret and hidden, and only a few elders know the religion. It's just an identity, right? And we work with that. Now you could say, well, there's other identities. Absolutely. Absolutely. Where you live, your gender, your economic status, you know, where your relatives may have come from, your work. But the religious identity of all of those is the largest slice of the pie. So if I got a limited access to someone, that's what I'm going to focus on. Okay? Kids. How many people here are teachers? Anybody here a school teacher? Used to be. Okay. Okay. So either you'll love what I'm going to say next, or you're really not going to like it. Okay? If you want to change kids, students, you got to change teachers, okay? And so working with the kids naturally led us to teacher training programs, okay? And that's what we do as well. So youth, teacher training programs. And we run something called the Excel Teacher Training Program, which is one of the most desirable teacher training, continuing ed, professional development programs in the Israeli high school system, period. And when you hear Israeli, don't just think Jewish. 20% of everybody in Israel, maybe even a little more now, are non-Jews, okay? They're Christians, they're Muslims, they're Druze, they're Alawis. There's a few Baha'i even, okay?
I'm sorry to ask you. I couldn't wait. I'm an atheist.
Okay, there's some of those too.
Okay, thank you.
Actually, there's a lot of those. Most of the Israeli Jewish population, while they keep Shabbat, they might go to high holidays with their grandmother, would probably consider, well, not probably, they do consider themselves atheist or agnostic. Okay? Kids, teachers, and then we work with Americans. Ta-da! And largely through adult education and experiential travel. That's how we do this, okay? And that's how we get to have that scope of last year, 10,000 people. We do this with about 6 staff members, okay? So we're super lean, stretching taller, really far. That's a good thing. So how do we do this? There's lots of ways to understand conflict in general and conflict in things. Keep doing that, okay? I'm ahead of schedule. And particularly in Israel, Palestine. And if you go to like a peace studies program or a conflict transformation program, there are 50 theories that they make you learn. Everybody chooses their favorite. I'm choosing my favorite to share with you. Okay? And it's a theory. Really developed by a man named Vamik Volkan. V-A-M-I-K. Volkan, like the Greek god. V-O-L-K-A-N. And Vamik Volkan I think he's dead now, was a Turkish Cypriot. So you know that Cyprus is divided between a Turkish side and a Greek side. And they're not just ethnically different, they're religiously different. Sound familiar? Yeah. And have we been able to sort that one out? No! For a lot of the same reasons, okay? That their progress hasn't been made in Israel and Palestine, and also in Lebanon, which are just off the coast of Cyprus. And so he was living this conflict in his own country, and he was a psychiatrist. And in his study of and work with individuals, he started to notice that individuals aren't just components of a bigger group, that big groups begin to take on personality, and big groups of people begin to act like individuals. All right? Sounds like kind of simple, right? But actually, he was the guy who figured this out, okay? That, you go from a crowd to a mob. Right? A mob is when they all have like a single mind, right? And so he was on to something. He started to then, instead of using psychology, remember Psych 101 class in college? Instead of using psychology to study conflict, He started using psychiatry to study conflict. Sort of turned the model inside out. That was the brilliant breakthrough. He went on to teach at almost every major university in the world. If you Google him, ask Dr. Google for von McVolken, there'll be like 300 pages of citation. Right? This is battle-tested, literally, theory. So, where are we going with this? In one particular book, if you were just going to read just one, Blind Trust is the one to read. It's got a little second title underneath it, but Blind Trust. And he goes through about 4 key things, and then we're actually going to do a little bit of this ourselves, which is fun. That's why we have our pens, and I will have paper for you too. All right? So the first thing he says that I'll repeat it, is groups of people take on a single identity, come acting like an individual. That identity is largely defined by 2 things. 2 things. Chosen glories and chosen traumas. So for the United States, what might be some chosen glories that define us as a people?
The Revolution.
The American Revolution. What else? Don't all scream at once. I'm not going to let you off the hook. Victory of World War II. Absolutely. Any others?
Civil rights marches.
Is that a trauma or a glory?
I think we wear it as a glory, at least certain communities.
Okay. That's that more ambivalent space. It's good to name some of those. Any other glories? Landing on the moon. Absolutely. And we can go on, right? Defeat of the Soviet Union, right? I mean, it goes on, all right? And those define a people, okay? How about chosen traumas? What are some historical traumas that define us?
Civil War.
Civil War. Vietnam, defeat of Vietnam. Slavery, 9/11. Okay? You get where I'm going here, right? And Vulcan wouldn't say this, but I would. Because of our sinful and broken nature as human beings, guess what has more influence on the identity, the glory or the trauma? Trauma. Okay. And he says that. Of these two, the trauma has like double or triple weight of the glory, right? And these traumas operate by time collapse, which it doesn't matter how long ago it was. You mention it, and people are in it. Okay? So my great-grandmother, who I knew until I was 16, came to the United States as an Ottoman subject. She had an Ottoman passport. That's a long time ago, right? A Greek Christian from Lebanon, right? She would talk all the time about the Ottoman Turkish conquest of Syria. That was like in the late 1400s. Okay? She felt it. She felt it. It operated by time collapse. You know, we'd be like, oh, stop talking about that. Can't you get over that? You weren't even there. No, she can't get over it. Why? This is part of her identity. It's not a fact in her head. It's part of her heart. Okay? They operate by time collapse. Because they shape identity, it means that if one person gets injured, I know these folks and use them as my. It means that if one person is injured, the whole group acts like they were injured. Okay? That if one of our family, our team, our tribe is hurt, we all respond. Okay? And then the last thing. Up you go, Jimmy. Right or left hand, Jimmy?
Sort of.
Sort of left. Which one do you favor? Left. Okay. So, Jimmy, I come to you in the summer when I see you, and I say, Seamus, I can sort out all your problems, but it will require me cutting off your left arm, because it gets you in a lot of trouble. And I can sort you out, but I got to cut it off. What you said?
Nope.
There you go. Why? Because it's part of his identity. That brokenness has come to define him. All right? And you say, oh yeah, thanks, Father Nick, but I love my left arm. We're buddies. Do you know what the trouble we've gotten into together? Okay? Thanks. And that's the challenge. All right? So let's get a little more tender, and then we're going to spin off and do this for ourselves. So let's think about Israeli Jews. What do you think is a chosen glory for Israeli Jews? You don't need to be Jewish to know this. Okay, the temple, the liberation, they would say, of the Western Wall, access to it, starting unimpeded access after the 6-Day War in 1967, June 1967. How many days was the 6-Day War? 5. Trick question. Those are absolutely right. Glory of the ancient temple, the victory of 1967. Anything else?
The establishment of Israel.
Absolutely. The creation of the state of Israel in 1948. Anything else? I mean, there's probably other things, but you got some big ones there. Ancient times temple, 1948, 1967. Okay? Those are big ones. There's others too, obviously. What do you think some of the chosen traumas are for Israel? Holocaust. Now that's something that came with them, right? Because Holocaust began and ended before 1948, right? That's that identity piece that's following Jewish immigrants. And there are, of course, Middle Eastern Jews. Is the Holocaust something they experienced? No. Does it play a day-to-day part in their life? Yes. This is the group identity. Okay. So, any others? Can you think of any others? Munich Olympics. Thank you. That's a very nice one. Thank you. You do know something about the Middle East.
I was thinking the Israelis who were told to leave North Africa, Arab lands.
Yeah, okay.
Post the 47, 48, some years later.
Yep, so a displacement.
Right.
Yeah.
Responsive displacement of them. Pack up the bags.
And go.
Okay.
Sure.
So, yeah, they were evicted.
They were evicted. Yeah. Folks from Morocco actually weren't evicted. They emigrated largely because they were told you can have a house, a piece of land, and they said, "Hey, sign me up." Okay, so it has more nuance to it, but absolutely displacement. Okay, and I want to remind you just a nanosecond of modern Jewish history, right? So we had the Holocaust, work camps, death camps, the ugliest evil stuff you can think of. And then the handful of people who survive, they go to their own homes. And there's other people living in them. and they see these folks who are just skin and bones, and they say, you got about 2 seconds to get off my piece of property. And then where'd they go? They go on boats if they're lucky. And they go to Palestine, where the locals really weren't expecting them. And the locals, no fault of their own, say, what are you doing in my front yard? Figurative front yard. And you see how each one of those reinforces the one behind it?
I mentioned a huge number of Russian immigrants left the dominant culture to come to the Middle East.
Yep.
So they have there's a little weakness in there as well.
For them as a subculture, actually they sort of saved Israel at that moment because they brought lots of people with them. And Israel's always sort of draining out people as they move on. What just happened on October 7th touched that little nerve of death and persecution, people showing up unexpectedly and killing you, scary, right? And touch that nerve, and that's part of the ferocity of the response. Okay, part of the ferocity of the response. All right, let's try it real quickly now for Palestinians. What do we think is a chosen glory for Palestinians?
I think October 7th.
No,
No.
that's for Hamas. Most Palestinians
Or not
would have nothing to do with that, thankfully.
Jerusalem over many years, though.
Your silence is the correct answer. This is one of the challenges for Palestinian identity as a land that has been under continuous occupation since recorded history. Think about that. Which probably means before recorded history. Okay? As a people, a distinct group, it's very difficult for them to identify a chosen glory. Very difficult, right? And they'd be ones that are more towards the middle. They're more ambivalent. I think a young Palestinian would say the first Intifada, which was the first time under occupation that Palestinians found a way to resist what they understood to be Israeli occupation. It was the first time they could resist it. But, that's not like founding a country or, sending people to the moon or, things like that. It doesn't quite have the same weight. All right, what do you think is a Palestinian trauma?
The Nakba.
What's the Nakba?
The catastrophe in 1948.
Okay, and you see how for one group it's the victory, and for the other group it's disaster. It's like two sides of the same coin, right? Same moment, looked at two different ways. Kind of like two people looking at the number 6 on the floor. One person sees a 9, one person sees a 6. Okay? And things like Islam, the growth of Islamic fundamentalism for some portions of Palestinian society are also looked on as disastrous. What's happening right now will be remembered as one of these disasters. Okay, the defeat of 1967 is also remembered as that. So they've got lots of trauma, but not much glory, right? Not much to scale off. So how do we stand? So how do we get people to begin to understand that their dominant hand, I'm speaking figuratively, could use a little
Excision.
well, not excision, but yeah, improvements in therapy.
Physical therapy.
Physical therapy, remedial therapy, okay? How do we do that? And that's part of, because it's those dominant hands, speaking figures, those traumas that bring us into conflict with others, okay? Particularly in Israel, Palestine. That 1948, 1967, those key dates. For one, there's a moment of glory and celebration. Whew, we're going to make it. That was what was going on in the Israeli mind in 1967. Whew, we're going to make it. The other, will we make it? Will we make it? So that's a process. That's a process of rehumanization. Only way we can make that happen is the encounter, sustained, structured, highly choreographed encounters, right? Where we're not just learning stuff. It's all experiential learning. You're learning not stuff about yourself, about another human being, with the end goal being, yes, transformation, but also lifelong friendship. Okay. That's huge because, you know, wanting positive change that includes others in the Middle East is a lonely path. And if you're swimming upstream by yourself, you're very vulnerable. You want to be swimming with other little fish upstream too, right? You need friends and allies. And that's a huge part of what we do, is create and foster lifelong friendships. So when these young people eventually are on the other side of a table or doing a business deal or a diplomatic deal or just, you know, figuring out what to do with a parking lot. They're like, I know you. How you doing? They can go forward. We know in our own lives, when you encounter a friend on when you're working on something difficult, it gets a lot easier, doesn't it? Because there's trust. Okay, there's trust. Okay, so what I think we're going to do, how much time do we have, Della? Quarter of?
It's
15 minutes?
Yeah, 15 minutes.
Okay, so what I think would be cool for you is take one of these little pieces of paper, pass it on. I'm going to give you one just for kicks. Take one of these pieces of paper, pass it on to just someone. We got more than we need there. And on one side of it, well, on the top part, write chosen glory. Chosen glory. And the other one at the bottom of the page, right? Chosen trauma. Do you need pens? Pens I got.
We could use a few more pieces of paper this time.
Pieces of paper. Jerry's holding is being stingy on the paper.
This pen's not working.
What?
Anyone?
Sure.
Can I switch this pen out? This is not working.
Complain to the rector.
I think you gave it to me.
She gave them to me.
Okay, fine.
Pass the ball.
Pen.
Pass the
We'll
ball.
blame Billy here.
Okay. So, need one? Yeah. Use that one. All right. So just for yourself now, right? Just think about your life and your family's life, like people you knew in your family, because these ideas of chosen trauma and chosen glory are really passed down by our grandparents. Okay? From grandparents, they skip a generation to children, grandchildren. And when an older person tells a 4-year-old about the Holocaust, that 4-year-old has no agency. she or he can't change the world. They're 4 years old. And that story, instead of possibly becoming like an action point, becomes an identity point. Okay? And so they're skipping generation of this, which is why it's really hard to get Jimmy to let me work on his left arm. Okay? So think about your own life, your own background. And you got the piece of paper yourself just for a second. Write down a chosen, let's start with the easy place, the chosen trauma in your life and the chosen glory. It's a chosen trauma. And we all have at least one. And then a chosen glory, like what's a great moment in your family's life. And everybody has one, at least one. So I'll tell you the two from both, one of each from my sides of the family. So I'm a direct, and there's a lot there's a lot there, right? So there's a glory in that. Sort of the America's preeminent explorer. And in my home, it's now my brother's home, was a deed for most of the state of Kentucky. Pretty cool. Right? And that just doesn't happen to happen. You do a lot. Pretty great. But also, what you don't get in those storybooks when you read as a kid is Daniel Boone was a really lousy surveyor. Really, really lousy surveyor. And actually had to flee into the Spanish territory of Missouri to escape angry neighbors and investors because he'd done all the lines for them. Okay? So, pretty great. Not so great. All right? What's fun about that, though, is he, during his time in Missouri, he was the administrator for the Spanish for English speakers because they were like, who are these crazy Anglos? We don't speak their language. He exacted justice on a man by the name of James Meek, who is my wife's great grandfather. Okay. And our grandfathers knew each other, and our fathers knew each other, and we're married now. Okay? My mother's side, one of the great moments for my mother's family is that I can't even do the number of greats, was the Byzantine governor of the city of Damascus. And he was the one that met the Arab armies when they arrived in 638 and handed them the key to the city. Long time ago, right? The disaster during this, was the First World War when they were starving to death. My grandmother, my great grandmother, and her 3 daughters, 2 of whom would die, and because there was no food, no work, no nothing, and they eventually found a family near Damascus that would take them in. Okay. So that was sort of the end of everything. They had been super prosperous people, just everything gone. All right. Cool. So who wants to share a trauma or glory? Just stand here until you do it. So you might as well. Jimmy, the newcomer.
The newcomer. Trauma would be the 1929 Depression. Yeah, our family was very much wiped out. My father's family, my grandparents, were living on the North Shore of Long Island, Locust Valley. We ended up living outside of Tucson, Arizona, in an adobe house with a dirt floor. And my grandmother had grown up as the daughter of a president of the United States, Benjamin Harrison. She was part of this. So that was pretty traumatic.
Yeah. You got a glory to, you got a glory in there?
Well, the glory is I'm a descendant of 2 presidents of the United States and signer of the Declaration of Independence, a member of the Daniel Boone survey team when they surveyed.
Maybe it was your fault.
Yeah. All kinds of soldiers in the Revolution, the War of 1812, the Civil War, the Indian Wars, World War I, World War II, Korea, everything.
So the glory is part of the fiber of the nation. Your family has, in every way been, there at every moment. Okay, someone else, come on, don't be shy. Who's going to do it? I can call on you just like a kid. Yeah, please come.
Okay.
You got to speak loudly because we're old. I'm old.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Chosen glory, being an American.
Okay.
Chosen trauma, being an American.
Yep. Yep. You want to add a little bit on each end because
Sure.
we all think we know what you're talking about, but how about if you make it a
So
little bit thicker?
let's focus on my father.
Okay.
My father, as a young man, became part of a movement for independence of Puerto Rico. My father, as World War II, was brought into the military, American military, U.S. forces, and made a career of the U.S. forces, and was a very proud American who fought in the Korean War, and he forgot all about his independence stuff. Glory, American glory, whatever. And we were brought up, I didn't know, all I knew is I was a Puerto Rican, and all of a sudden, we go to the United States, and I'm now an American. Okay, so I went through the same thing. I then became very proud to be an American. Chosen trauma, who am I? Am I Puerto Rican, American? It doesn't seem to be compatible. Not only that, but when I came to the United States, I was, you're black. I'm you, trauma. Well, anyway, I'm going to stop.
No, but that's it. Okay, there it is. So we're also getting a sense this identity isn't one or just the other. It kind of morphs around a little bit. It's like one of those gummy worms or something. You squeeze on it, kind of pops on the other end a little bit, right? Someone else? One last one? One last one?
Well, I'd just like to observe that we're getting here that so often the glory and the trauma are cousins.
Absolutely they are.
So they become more tender because the trauma undoes the threatens the glory.
Yep.
So it becomes even more and more glory to somehow reclaim the shame of the trauma.
To help redeem it. And that's one of the specific reasons Jerusalem Peace Builders, it is interfaith, because theological tools however we understand God, promises of God have the power to do that kind of connection. And for many of us, the one and the other, I mean, they're kissing cousins. They're two sides of the same coin, right there, right there. Okay, I'm picking you. Let's do it. Last one.
So I'll do it. Chosen glory. My grandparents, immigrants out of Europe into Brazil. My parents, immigrants out of Brazil. I was born all over. I use that as a chosen glory because I cherish it. It's interesting. I'm playing with the word chosen in my mind. I'm not giving that to my kids. So what does that mean? Is it a chosen as well? There's two sides. And on the trauma side, I've experienced fractured relationships in the family, both in the previous generation and in the current generation.
And those fractures, do they have to do with the immigration, or is that just other things?
Family dynamics.
Family dynamics, okay. And thank you for sharing that. So just a little taste of it, right? It's real, and it shapes who we are. So let me just wrap up now. So it's a really great tool, right? It helps you, Vomit Vulcanzitis can help you understand history and home, okay? And home. And it can do that because he's a psychiatrist, right? I mean, he started working with people at home and scaled it up. It's very powerful, easy to remember. Chosen traumas, chosen glories. And then you just remember grandparents pass them down. They work on time collapse. They shape our identities. When one of us gets into trouble, we all respond, okay? Think of Israel. One soldier is kidnapped. The whole country goes into high alert, right? Give you a Palestinian example. One boy is shot, let's say, by mistake. And the whole village is at the funeral, right? And people get really angry. They're not even related to the kid. And they're upset. I mean, they're feeling it, right? And there's examples of this all over the world, okay? So that's what we're doing in all these sessions with the kids, with the teens over a course of 4 years, with teachers over the course of 3 years. Okay, is listening to this, rehumanizing, creating empathy, and overcoming the sense that while identities are unique, their ingredients are held in common. There's lots of people in this room who can say fractured relationships. That doesn't make yours any less poignant. But you're not alone in that, right? And that's a trust building piece and takes time, all right? But it works. It works. So I want to give you just a couple of examples. So right now, people wrote me, I was evacuated out of Jerusalem following October 7th. I evacuated out through Amman, Jordan. People wrote me, and when I left that morning, I knew when I come back, things will not be the same place again. There'll be things that will be lost forever. People have written me, including Della, like, where's everything? What's happening? Is it going to continue? Jimmy was one of the first people who texted me. He's like, you okay? Right? And I am happy to say to you, because of this kind of base work we've done, it's continuing. Right? The kids are meeting and the teachers are meeting. The kids are more volatile because they're more vulnerable as people, right? And they're less mature. So they're like, can be aggressive with each other. The teachers, more mature, less vulnerable, are like, I hate Hamas. But just because you're a Palestinian Arab doesn't mean that you belong to Hamas or you're responsible for it, right? It's a mature thought, okay? I want to give you, I'm going to just give you one example of a really great young man. So there's a young man who went through 4 years of our program. Actually, I'm lying. He went through 2 years of our program. He was one of the reasons we created our program, because he came to us. I'm in this other program, but all we do is play like Frisbee and hacky sack. Is there something more? Is there something more? So he has gone on. He was got into the Hebrew University Law School, which is the highest faculty, most desirable department in Israel. He was asked not once, but twice to be the captain of the law team that competed representing Israel in the Israeli, in the World Moot Court Championships that happen in Washington, D.C. every year in sort of February, March. He won like the law prize for the state. He went on to be asked to clerk for the Supreme Court, head of the Supreme Court in Israel. Pretty cool. A leader. We're looking for leaders. I didn't tell you, he's not Jewish. He's Palestinian Christian. That's the kind of individual we're looking for, trying to recruit and trying to nourish. Because every step of that journey, there were people telling him to stop, turn around, go back. You don't belong here. But every step forward he took, he was also creating allies, right? I mean, think of all the non-Arab people that were in his life that helped him be elected to lead the law team, to receive the prize, to be asked to be on to clerk on the Supreme. Only 5 other non-Jews have ever been asked to do it, right, since 1948. And he's one. His name is Jurius. It means George. It also is nice because it rhymes with curious, right? So we call him Curious Jurius, all right? So I hope that you all remain curious, right? There's a lot going on here. You know, as you read some of the newspapers, put some of the overlay of this chosen trauma, chosen glory in on this. When you're wondering about some things that are happening about grandma and grandpa, think, you know, put that overlay on there too. And I'm a person of faith, so I encourage you to be praying for Israelis, Jews, Palestinian Arabs. Pray for people who are grieving. Pray for the innocent who died. Pray for decision makers who hold those powers of life and death, right? But, you know, peace isn't going to happen tomorrow, right? But we can ramp down the violence, right? Ramp down the violence. And eventually, you know, even in New York City, a little flower comes out from the pavement, right? It breaks through the pavement. And that's what we're looking for here. Thanks so much. And I'm remiss in my duty to say that if you are inspired to support Jerusalem Peace Builders, I'm going to leave a couple little envelopes.